I was actually commanding a specialist airborne bomb disposal unit, and a couple of weeks before the war started, we were given a warning order and told we were going to be parachuting into a divisional-sized Iraqi position, and we were going to be parachuting under fire. And my team and I, which was about half a dozen guys, were going to be going in and clearing lots and lots of improvised explosive devices that were attached to all these GOSPs in the oil fields. And hence it was known Operating Certain Death, because, even on an operational parachute jump, normally you're talking, 50% injuries straight away. Then we were going to have to overcome this division of Iraqis, then find the IEDs. So Operation Certain Death. For some reason, it was cancelled at the very last minute, and a normal ground offensive went in. So I didn't go in for another year. I went in 2004. But even then, we were sort of experienced operators. I'd been attached to the Special Forces for 4 years. So, I was a fairly sort of adept soldier. But I don't think anything really prepared us for what we saw and what we experienced. And certainly 4 days into my own tour, my team and I were ambushed on the way back from dealing with some improvised explosive devices. My number two was shot, I was shot, and we had to fight our way out. And it was the first time, we'd actually been involved in close combat and had to engage with the enemy. So, yeah, it was a real baptism of fire, I think. And, it was a relentless tour. We did a survey back in 2018, and we looked at all the sites that Daesh had occupied in northern Iraq. And there was an estimated 500,000 improvised explosive devices. And when ISIS was created, they were recruiting the very best professionals from every single profession, whether they were journalists, doctors, lawyers, mechanics, and that included weapons engineers. So their IEDs were the absolute sort of world-class IEDs. And we saw them in the urban environment in places like Mosul, where you'd see every single person would have a suicide vest on. So when we were clearing the buildings of all the rubble after the war, we'd find sort of, bodies and skeletons, but each skeleton would have something like this. And effectively, it's a strip of plastic explosive. In the back of it, high explosive detonating cord. It's got a power source and multiple different firing switches. And then on the front of it, lots and lots of nuts and bolts and washers and metal fragmentation. So that if they were overpowered, they'd make a final stand, they'd press the plunger switch, and the high explosive would detonate, killing them and killing anybody that would attack them. And you would see everything from drones through to car bombs, through to truck bombs, through to mines, even speed bumps and that sort of stuff in the urban environment. And then in addition to that, there were entire swathes of rural areas. Every village, every farm was covered in what we call improvised mines. So one of the ones I've got here, we call it a VS500 because it's similar to a conventional Italian VS mine, as they're called. But this one is an anti-vehicle mine. It contains about the same amount of explosive, to put it into context, as the Manchester Arena bomb, for example. And everyone's familiar with the terrible loss of life there caused by ISIS. So when we're dealing with one of these, we're very conscious that each of us has done hundreds of these devices. And one sort of incorrect move or incorrect drill could cause us to be instantly vaporized. It's about sort of 5 or 6 kilos of high explosive in there. And those guys that have served in Afghanistan will recognize the color of the explosive there, ammonium nitrate and aluminium, which was a big sort of favorite used by the Taliban as well in Afghanistan. And then, of course, we have these pressure plates, which just literally strips of metal, waterproofed in rubber inner tubes, tire inner tubes, that sort of thing, with a battery inside, wires coming out the end, and spacers. So basically, they're held apart, they're buried just under the surface of the ground, and as soon as you step on them or drive over them, the contacts come together, and they'll fire off a detonator, and then that'll be attached to something like this sort of big plastic drum, full again of high explosive, that would detonate and vaporize you and destroy any vehicles. When we went in 2003, we thought we were saving the Iraqi people from the barbaric clutches of Saddam and his regime. And we quickly realized that actually we were seen as an occupying force. Even the people that sort of came across as being friendly were always very cautious of us. Now it's an entirely different story. We're welcome with open arms. We're welcome into their houses. there are people that, I work with that were from the Basra area when I was there that were potentially, incredibly hostile towards the British Armed Forces, some of whom may have even been in the ambush that, that targeted my colleagues and I. And we are actually really close friends now. We work together to clear Iraq of improvised explosive devices, explosive hazards. And, we're not just work colleagues, we're mates. We get on really, really well. And I think the Iraqi people welcome us, and we've sort of shared that plight as well in, the barbaric atrocities they suffered under ISIS. The fact that we helped them to get through that and to ultimately overcome ISIS as well. And then since then, there's been a massive international footprint here supporting Iraq to get back on its feet. I think that's the main thing you see. You see this sort of, welcoming you with open arms, and they're really supportive and very, very friendly.